So I thought that it would be interesting to compare the filmmaking techniques from the summer 2023 blockbuster hit, the Barbie movie directed by Greta Gerwig, and the 2024 Golden Globe winning film The Substance, directed by Coralie Fargier. And I want to try to remain unbiased, but I have a clear favorability towards The Substance. It's probably one of my favorite films of this year, or 2024, if not my favorite, one of my favorite films ever. But I do think that the Barbie movie falls short in several areas. I really love the acting and the costume design is great, but I think that the script is a little weak, and it's one of those films that's frustrating because there were a lot of rewrites, I think, and reshoots, and you can tell in there. I think there's a really good movie left in there inside of a mediocre one. And I think with a couple adjustments and script changes, it could have been a much more solid film. Okay, so we're going to start with this first scene from the Barbie movie to compare. So this is the scene where Barbie and Ken first appear in the real world, which is in Los Angeles.
Me.
Yeah, they're also staring at me.
Ooh, love that.
Wow.
I feel kind of ill at ease. Like, I don't know the word for it, but I'm conscious, but it's myself that I'm conscious of.
I'm not getting any of that. I feel what can only be described as admired, but not ogled. And there's no undertone of violence.
Mine very much has an undertone of violence. Oh, look, a construction site.
Okay, so let's start with some positives of the scene. So I really like the choice of acting, how they act like if dolls were to come alive and go to the real world, like sort of the stiff, like the way that Margot Robbie is blinking. The facial expressions are really good. Again, the costume choice is really good. Okay, so now we get into some of the negatives, which is sort of the thesis of this video. So, show, don't tell filmmaking. So it's sort of why it works in The Substance, why sometimes it's better to show your audience than tell, especially when it comes to satire. So I kind of like the scene direction of having the over exaggerated reactions from the humans as soon as Barbie and Ken gets into the real world. But I don't know what the best word to be for it would be. It comes off as a little forced, maybe. I don't want to say cringy, but it's just it doesn't feel natural. Like the scene doesn't feel natural. And that's another issue I have with the scene. The way the dialogue is written, I don't love the way that the dialogue is written because it doesn't feel natural to the way that people would talk. It sort of feels like if you put a script through ChatGPT of like if you want to say something, some feminist type of speak for your essay, like put it through the AI and have it write it for you. And I get that that's part of the joke. Part of the joke in the movie is that these characters, these dolls, are talking with like very intellectual, exaggerated speech. But I don't think it fits the absurdist satire of this scene. Um, I do like the idea of them coming to the real world and immediately seeing the difference in patriarchy. I think that is a good idea. I just don't think it was executed in the cleanest way or the best way to show this feeling that Barbie and Ken have as soon as they arrive to the real world. We get into probably my favorite scene in The Substance. It's a really good scene, if not the best scene in the movie. And it establishes the satire very well, and the characters don't have a lot of dialogue. They don't speak a lot, but there's a lot
Okay, so now
shown with the camera work and the scene setup. So you see Harvey, and he's eating all this shrimp, and it's very over exaggerated. And I love the way that the camera pans towards this waitress, and she bends over, and you can see that you can see her underwear. You can see she's wearing revealing underwear. And I really like this because not only does it establish Harvey's character as someone very misogynistic, it also shows subtly that we in this film are in an altered reality. So the reality of this film is not going to be exactly as grounded as the reality in the real world. And it's kind of subtle because she's it's shown to be a very fancy restaurant, a very high upscale restaurant, but she's wearing a skirt that would probably not be deemed quote unquote appropriate if this was a real life upscale restaurant. But it's just so subtly shorter than what would usually be allowed that it doesn't go on like full absurdist yet, like the end of the movie does. But it's just hinting at something is slightly wrong with this reality, but we don't know yet. So now we get into the scene, which is probably, unfortunately, one of my least favorite scenes in the Barbie movie. It has nothing to do with America Ferrera. I think it's really well acted, but the thing I don't like about this scene is there's such a big disconnect from the dialogue and the way she's acting, and I think that's what makes me cringe about it is because her acting is so good, her acting is so raw, and then the speech or the monologue is just very very choppy. Like I feel like it needs to have like a second person look at it or something like that because it's a lot of the things could have been edited like with the Grammarly or something like that maybe to make it sound more coherent and less, I don't want to say preachy, but that's another thing with filmmaking. So I agree with the premise of the Barbie movie. It's a good theme to have, it's a good thesis to have. But the problem is, even liberal people who agree with your thesis of the movie don't like being preached at. People just don't like being preached at. I think sometimes it's better to assume that your audience is smart, and if they miss something, they can always go back and rewatch the film. And also, again, I just feel like the scene direction is a bizarre choice because it's set up like it's filmed like an SNL skit, and it just goes straight from America Ferrera like seeing all these other discontinued Barbies to seeing that the stereotypical Barbie is upset and then just launching into this monologue. And I just don't think the emotions hit where they're supposed to hit. And I think that's important because this is supposed to be like the big moment, like the big thesis. This is the big moment of the film, their big argument that they're trying to make. So you need to, sort of crescendo into this monologue. It shouldn't be something that just jumps out at you out of nowhere. And I think it's frustrating because parts of the monologue I like, and then parts of it it doesn't make sense. Like she says, you have to have money, but you can't ask for money. That's crass. I like that. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money. That's good. But then she says, you have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. Why not just say, after you say you have to be a boss, just say, but you can't be bossy? Because you already said you can't ask for money. That's crass. It flows better with the monologue. She says you have to be a career woman, but always be looking out for other people. And then, but before that, she says you have to be a mother, but don't talk about your kids too much. I think those could have been combined. So she could have said you have to be a career woman, but don't talk about your kids so much. I just think, again, you it becomes preachy. Like, I think the monologue is too long, and I think it would have been more effective. The scene would have been more effective if they highlighted the emotion of the monologue and they made it shorter, because it just feels like you're being talked at, which, even if you have a good message in your film, it's not going to translate to the audience because, like I said, a lot of people don't like to be talked at and told what they should think. Okay, so this is the audition scene from The Substance.
Thanks. We'll let you know by next week.
Thank you so much. I'm just dying to get the part.
Great dancer. Too bad her boobs aren't in the middle of her face instead of the nose. Next!
So it's the woman who is basically going after the new role on Elizabeth's old workout show. And what I really love about this scene is it says a lot. Again, it says a lot, and not a lot of dialogue. It's the pauses in between the dialogue. So I really, really love the part where the two casting directors look at each other, and after she leaves, he's like, I wish there was like a boob in the middle of her nose where her nose should be. He's saying she has a very big nose, and it's not pleasant to look at. But it's the pause where the next director doesn't acknowledge his comment and just says next, like next person, because it says a lot. It's really talking about how in the real world how men talk about women, and how often it is that we hear casual misogyny and comments like this and no one says anything to stop them. And I think that's really powerful, actually. And it's a comedic scene as well, but I think it does very well show the audience how this misogyny works without, like forcibly telling them. And I think if this were, directed like the Barbie movie was, or written like the Barbie movie was, maybe he would say, oh, she should have a boob where her nose is, and then the next guy, the director's like, ha 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 ha, and he starts laughing evilly, and they start laughing evilly together, like, because you need to know that they're evil. But the way that The Substance does it is smart, it's subtle, and it doesn't force feed the audience what the message is. The scene is from the Barbie movie when the Kens have brainwashed the other Barbies under the patriarchy, so the stereotypical Barbie is trying to deprogram them. And honestly, this scene, it doesn't work for me. It feels a little mean-spirited. I don't know. Like, it feels very personal for a movie that's for a very generalized audience. It honestly feels like Greta Gerwig is just like, like she's upset with the way she's been treated as a female filmmaker, and that I can understand. Like, I'm sure it's very hard to deal with the misogyny and the mansplaining that comes with being a female filmmaker, a female director. But the joke just, it doesn't work for me. The tone, it just doesn't work. Like, the joke about the Photoshop it's just very, very specific, and I don't think it fits the tone of the scene very well. And this scene is like, I do like the Godfather joke. I think it's a little funny. I do get what they're trying to do with this joke, but it just sort of falls flat to me. Because again, it's just the same joke that they do over and over again in this movie, where it's the same joke from the beginning where Ken and Barbie go to the real world, where it's like, oh, these dolls are playing humans. It's Ken's first patriarchy, and they're saying, it's like, look at these dolls. They're saying they're saying complicated, crazy feminist lecture. They're giving a feminist lecture, and it just, I don't know, it comes off as very pseudo intellectual to me, because just because you use a lot of fancy words and you talk like you're writing an essay does not make the scene itself smart, because a lot can be said in very little dialogue. In fact, I think it's overcompensating for the fact that there's maybe not a lot of material in this movie that isn't somewhat shallow. It's a lot of people say this movie's like baby's first feminism, which is kind of true, and it's good to introduce people to feminist concepts, but I don't like the fact that the movie is acting like it's smarter than it is. Okay, so this is the final scene that we're gonna watch from The Substance. And it's the scene where Elizabeth takes the substance, so she's in her 7 days as Sue. She's become Sue. And she's building a new chamber in her bathroom, because she wants to hide away the body from when she's Elizabeth during those 7 days. And she's making a lot of loud noises by doing construction in the bathroom. So her neighbor is very angry, and he goes to knock on the door. And you can see by the way his expression and the tone of his voice that he's very upset with the noise. But then once she opens the door and he sees it's a beautiful young woman, and not Elizabeth, who is beautiful but middle-aged, and that's who he was expecting, his demeanor just completely changes 100%. And what I really like about this scene is there's not a lot of dialogue is said by the characters, but you can see by their expressions and the way that they're acting, it reflects real life, because he is making a crass joke about how he's handy and he has a hammer, and Sue just doesn't care. She gives him this look like, whatever, like, I don't care, whatever, and he still keeps talking. And I think that's a very good way to also satirize what happens in the real world, where a lot of the time men will just keep being creepy and keep being sexual, even when the woman is clearly not enjoying his advances. He will just keep talking because he just likes to flirt with a pretty woman. He doesn't care what she thinks or if she's responsive to it. And that's why I think overall that The Substance is a better film to show people, especially if you want to show someone who maybe doesn't know a lot about feminism. It's a really good film that shows people challenges women face, in all women, not just women in the acting industry face. And it's not in a way that'll make the person watching feel like they're being talked down to. And it's in a way where it's interesting, because the more you watch the film, the more times you watch the film, the more things you pick up on that you don't pick up on the first time. So that's why, to me personally, I think that The Substance is a much, much better film than the Barbie movie. And I think it really does a great job of satirizing the patriarchal issues that women face every day in a way that's not force feeding the audience. And it's a shame. I think there's something to be said, that the Barbie movie could have been a better film. I don't know if maybe they were rushed, or they they were forced by the studio to cut a lot of things out. I think that's what happened, from what I understand from like reading behind the scenes. Because I don't think that a general audience can't understand feminism, because Squid Game season 2 just came out, and there's a lot of people, if you go online, they're very positive. Their response to the trans woman character is very positive, because it's it's about the way that they portray her. It's a good way to portray that character, because it's not just telling the audience how a trans woman should act. She's being herself and she's being authentic. And I think that authenticity comes off when people are watching a film. And it's just a shame, because I wish the Barbie movie was better. I had It starts out really good. It starts out really well. It starts out a really good film. I think the intro is very good, but it just sort of loses itself throughout the movie, and I think it goes to show that it's difficult to be an indie film director and to take on a big studio budget film like this, because she's trying to fit an indie film into something that is a big budget film, and it makes it seem like, well, you can't have overt feminist message in a big blockbuster film, and I just think that's not true. I think it's just about how it's executed. But then at the end of the day, maybe capitalism interferes too much, and really is no way to make the film 100% authentic. I don't know, but I think that there are ways of doing better with screenwriting like this. Okay, so I really hope that you enjoyed my video. If I get a little excited, film is a really big special interest of mine. So, I don't want to be telling the YouTube audience, what to think either. So if you have your own opinions, that's awesome. I'd love to hear them. All right, and see you in the next video, maybe.